Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Joshua Kahn with the news. At 3:05, windows all across Derry shattered from shockwaves following an explosion in Haven. We take you to Ben Graham, reporting live from Haven. What do you mean there's too many signals? Did you at least put fresh batteries in his tape recorder? There are no batteries in Derry. Seriously? My apologies, listeners, for these technical difficulties. We will update you as soon as we know what's become of Haven. You're listening to Derry Public Radio.
This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King book club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, C.M. Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
And Benjamin Graham.
What up, constant readers?
And today we are covering Book 2 of the Tommyknockers, if you are following along. And if not, major spoilers ahead. And Josh is leading our discussion.
Yes, I am. So much happens. I want to dive right into this because it's insane. This Book 2 is almost... could just be its own book, it feels like. So book 2 is titled The Tales of Haven, and it takes us back all the way to the beginnings of Haven. Sorry, I mean Montville Plantation. Sorry, Cootersville? No, Montgomery. Ilium. Haven. Yes, Haven. Books of Haven. I don't know why we get the entire town's history of forever.
Do we need to even discuss this chapter? It does nothing. It drives me crazy because King is great at doing this, these little miniature histories, most notably the history of the Marston House. He does very well in Salem's Lot. And then, of course, we haven't talked about it, but the history of Derry in it, which he wrote just a year before this. What happened? But he does the history of Derry, and it's like thematic and shows how it affected the town and its evolution, and it was always there. That does not come into play. It's like the fact that the ship was in Haven does not play into its history fucking at all.
The reason I was bringing it up is because I didn't know if I was missing something. Nope. Because it talks about crazy revival preacher and all this interesting backstory, but it just doesn't really affect how except for it sets up several little callbacks that aren't huge. They're just oh, neat.
Yeah, it's honestly, if you cut this chapter from the book, which is a lot of this second book, if you cut it, nothing would change.
No.
I don't know. I kind of liked it because it did give a little bit of that sense that, first episode we talked about how the influence of this ship, how powerful it is until she starts digging it up. And I was thinking it was just sort of completely muted. But in this, we find out that it's not. It's always had some sort of influence or control over the townspeople.
But has it?
Yeah, depending on who lives closer. I think that's why the priest was so charismatic and crazy. I think he was a swindler, but I think he also got swept up in that. I think that's why people were more fell into what he was selling easier. I think that's why the guy killed the baby and his wife. Ultimately.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Did they? Yeah, they say that they lived
in the forest.
In that radius.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess. But that's also much later on into book 2. They have this part where Ev Hillman is doing all this research, and he's like, well, I guess people do go missing in the woods a lot.
We're going to come back to that at that time.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I have so many things to say about it.
And that little bit accomplishes what this entire first chapter it hints at barely. It's not needed.
I will give you guys that it is weird because the way it's done, it reminds me of a much later season of a really great TV show, and they're shoehorning something in, and you're like, Well, why didn't you just set that up from the beginning? That wasn't really part of what we've been doing this whole time. You're just shoving that in there.
Oh my!
Even though it's one book, is kind of what it felt like.
That's also the last chapter of book 2.
Yes.
Is like, oh shit! I spent so much time dicking around with a bunch of characters we don't know or care about. Duh, we have to set up what's actually happening.
Wait, what plot is happening?
Yeah, why is anyone doing anything that they're doing?
Which we should mention that for the majority of book 2, Bobby and Guard are just not there.
Mm-hmm.
They're referenced a couple times, but for more or less, they're not here this entire section.
I love who we do get, though. I love Ruth and I love Ev.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's actually one of the parts about book 2 I like the most, is it's really cool. Like I said, I like this book structurally, where we spend an entire first part of the book getting to know I really struggle to call them protagonists. This book doesn't have any protagonists or antagonists.
They're just tagonists.
Yeah. Setting up these two characters who are ostensibly our main characters, and then in the middle of the book, they're just gone. And I kind of like that a lot.
It makes the most sense because if we were following them, book 2 would be they go back the next day and dig some more. They go back the next day and dig some more. So I thought this was really effective to get around jumping past the boring part of what they're doing and see how it's affecting everybody else.
At the end of this, I'd like to workshop how to make how we could have made this a book.
Okay, I'm here for it.
Okay.
I want to touch base. The first person we get a full story on, Becca Paulson, who is we talked about last episode, Bobby's mailman who's having an affair. Well, Becca Paulson is his wife, and she has a 3D picture of Jesus that talks to her and gets her to electrocute her husband to death with an invention.
Very needful things.
Very.
Loved this chapter.
This chapter was the point at which I messaged our group chat and I said, fuck. And it was kind of going back to the way we start the chapter with the town history. It was showing us more of that, but with more recent. And it was the one about the guy in the woods hunting
When he
with
killed his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's setting up as it's going through the townspeople that everyone is... The first symptom of the ship seems to be low-grade telepathy. Telepathy?
It's my favorite fish.
Damn it, beat me to the joke. Bastard. Low-grade telepathy where they can kind of read each other's minds. Sometimes, that's another thing. The book really goes in and out of how much anyone can read anyone's mind at any given time.
Sure, I guess it depends on how affected they are. But I do like that the end of all of this, she electrocutes her husband to death, and it's only at that point that she realizes, oh, it wasn't Jesus talking to me. I was getting these telepathic thoughts. It's me all along. I wanted to kill my husband. And then she just throws herself on him and they burn to death.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But when the examples that King gives of what Sarah Paulson knows about her neighbors, it shows King doesn't really have a sense for escalation. Because the first thing he talks about is, who is it? This guy in her husband's poker game, she knows, shot his dad. And the reason he thinks it was just for money, but the real reason is because he was molested by his dad. And he describes it graphically.
Very graphic.
Very graphically. But then the next thing she knows is, what was it?
The order that I wrote these down in is Jesus told her Moss Harlington, the reason Moss Harlington murdered his father, a secret sexual preference, teenage drug use, and poop pranks.
Yeah, that's right. And the last thing is like some guy shit in his like boss's room or office or something. It's like, that's not the order you reveal those.
Oh God, that's perfect. So something these first two chapters did was throw me for a loop, thinking that, oh, each one of these stories is going to be a standalone vignette that's not going to impact anything else. Mm-hmm. But our next chapter is where that all changes. Because our next chapter is Hilly Brown, our 10-year-old magician. What did you guys think about Hilly just from Jump Street?
I loved it because the place I thought it was going with his character, well, I mean, not the tragic part, but the part about him being really good at something. You know, the parents were afraid that he had some sort of disability, and he's actually really, really talented. And it seems like he had the supportive family who was willing to work with him and try to figure out what he would be really good at and focus on his strengths. And then he has this adorable little brother, and of course something awful's going to happen.
Right.
The 4-year-old little brother, David, is just super adorable, and I feel so bad for him for every single second after we meet him.
This is another one of King's things where he does wholesome, loving family just to make it fucking worse for you.
Yes.
And it's funny what you said, Josh, about thinking that this whole second book was going to be nothing but vignettes. Because this chapter, if you took this chapter out of the book and just put it in a short story collection, fantastic.
Yeah.
It could stand alone. And I think I would have preferred that book 2 was just a short story collection hidden inside of another book.
That would be insane and awesome.
Right?
So Hilly he's tested as a genius, and for his birthday he gets a magic kit, and he, no matter how hard he works, he's not a showman. And that's what the whole thing's lacking. He gets like the polite applause because like the tricks are happening and it's okay. But he wants the oohs and ahs. He wants somebody to faint because his trick is so good, which is insane.
Which is hilarious if you've ever owned a child's magician set like I did.
I did too, Ben.
Yeah.
I also owned a child magician for a short period.
I was crushed when I did my first magic trick for my grandparents because I'd go there after school. And it was obviously the silk scarf tucked into the fake thumb. And they totally called out my fake thumb. Thanks, Grandma and Grandpa. I could have been a great magician.
Well, after the influence of the Tommyknockers is taking over, we get that more people are being inspired to make these inventions. And Hilly gets inspired to make a teleporter, I guess?
Very the prestige. Hopefully not, though.
He also, I realized I made a note at this point that this town single-handedly saved Radio Shack.
Yeah.
Because that's always where they name drop. Go to Radio Shack. Get all these things.
It's one of the most frustrating things in the book for me is that I get that what he's trying to do with the Tommyknockers technology, being like, you can get so much power. It is so stupid that they're like, we somehow made an infinitely powerful device with D-cell batteries and some wires.
We made a small sun and trapped it in a force field with this egg carton.
Yeah, very stupid, but kind of love it.
Yeah, so he makes this machine, and then he puts on his big show, which I feel like he realizes way too late that his show is just disappearing and reappearing in increasingly larger items.
One of my favorite parts of the book is him making that realization. He's like, well, I guess people aren't going to be super amazed. If they didn't like the disappearing and reappearing tomato, they might get a little bored of the disappearing and reappearing bike and disappearing and reappearing washing machine.
It all culminates to his grand finale, which is the disappearing little brother. And David wants no part of it. Like, he's crying and begging to not come up on stage.
Did you guys start screaming inside your head at this moment and then continue screaming for the rest of the chapter?
Yes.
I remembered what happened, obviously, and yeah, it is very unnerving because this is also, I mean, the previous chapter did have 2 violent deaths, but this is the first we're seeing of like the change in mindset that the ship is giving, because Hilly is like this sweet kid who they keep saying one thing that he's always done is love his brother. And he snaps at David and says, you're gonna do it. and like scares David even more.
And he's
before
trying to
doing this trick.
smile on stage, and he's crying and grimacing, and just the way that that part was written, it was so good.
I pulled this piece of dialogue. He'd had more success loving David than he'd had doing anything else he set his hand to, including magic. And I just said, oh no. Because
the King has some tells, and if he's talking about how much two characters love each other, then something bad's coming.
It's so infuriating, though, because when he does put him up there, and David loves his brother just as much as he loves him, so he agrees to do the trick, even though he's terrified. Nobody cares. He disappears, and everyone's like, okay, great, now we can go inside. It's too hot out here, whatever.
They think he's under the stage. But he just dropped down.
And nobody looks.
And Hilly, the way he describes Hilly losing his mind, like that Hilly in this moment realizes he had never thought, like he knew that this device makes things go away and come back, but until he sends his little brother away, he doesn't think where they go.
Yeah.
And he'd never tried out on anything living.
Yeah.
And he keeps hitting the pedal that he has, and David just doesn't come back. And he starts frantically saying, like, oh, I promise I'll give him all my G.I. Joes if he just comes back when I do it this time.
Except my two favorite. Because he is a kid.
Yeah. But then he said SS all of them after that doesn't work. And he like passes out. He almost goes insane. Probably does go insane and just collapses.
And the only person that even remotely cares is his grandpa, Ev, who even then gets so freaked out that he walks away.
Yeah. Next, we briefly get to meet Bent and Jingles, who also a story that I thought was going to go on a lot longer. This section is so brief. So we're going to circle back to most of what happens.
Yeah, I figured this next big chunk of the book would be easier if we just do it chronologically.
Yes.
Which is something King refuses to do.
All right, so we'll circle back to Bent and Jingles because they are important to our next character.
Okay, they are two characters named Bent and Jingles, and not one character named Benton Jingles.
Yeah.
Although that is on par with most of the names of the people in town.
It
I
is
actually like that.
Benton Rhodes and Peter Jingles Gabbins, who apparently there's some character named Jingles that...
who cares?
Whatever.
Who cares?
They're not here for very long. But they are part of Ruth McCausland's story. CM, tell us a little bit about Ruth.
Ruth is amazing, and I love her. And when Josh asked if there was anybody we really wanted to talk about, I made the joke, I want to talk about Ruth. Because even though I haven't yet read the Bill Hodges trilogy, I feel like just the way that, Josh, you described her and kind of a little bit of what we got from her, for me, she reminded me of that type of character, someone further along in her self-growth process than Holly was, more sure of herself, more confident, but just a person that you would love to know. And we'll get into this, but the townspeople in the book itself describes her as the heart of the town, and everybody loves her. And
We all love her.
And we do. I love her.
She does everything.
Yeah.
She's what all? Because
She was the library. She started the library. She used to canvass for charities, several different charities all over the place. And then she became the constable of the town.
Yes, the first female constable, one of, 4 female constables in Maine.
She also graduated with a law degree.
Yeah, she graduates with a law degree specifically just to help her husband, who is a state.
Well, she was in law school when they met.
Oh, okay.
So she said she wouldn't get married because if she became a lawyer and he planned on being a state trooper, that they could be better partners.
Yeah.
Which, again, Ruth, you're amazing.
I think can I just talk about the dog thing? Because I
Yes.
think that summarizes her character
absolutely.
perfectly. So when the book gives us this little backstory about when she was canvassing for the American Cancer Society, I believe, and she would always do such a good job because she went to every door. She even went to the doors that people would typically avoid, kind of rough places that no one would usually go to.
Yeah, Haven's kind of a Hickville.
A little bit. And one of these places she went to, no one was home except for a dog. And the dog bit her. And she's like, all right. So she starts walking back to her car, and the dog bites her again. And before she can get into her car, bites her a third time and takes a chunk out of her calf. So she very calmly gets the gun out of her trunk, puts a bullet in the dog, wraps it up in a blanket, takes it to the vet. And the whole time, she's not complaining. She's not screaming or crying, which I would be. But I'm a baby.
For sure.
And she calls the owner, and she explains, your dog bit me 3 times. It was 1 too many, and I shot it. And I hope you'll still give to charity, though, because it's really important. And the guy, I love how it describes, he tells her off. He says, he's like more eloquent than he could ever hope to be or would ever be again in his life.
Yeah.
So the level of profanity that he reached, he would reminisce about for the rest of his life, which is fantastic. Yeah, that whole segment is awesome, and it shows how calm and collected and how forgiving almost, while still standing her ground.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here first. CM loves violence against dogs. I think that's the take.
We're getting shut down by PETA.
That is so not true. Like, we're never going to be able to do Cujo.
But don't worry, she didn't shoot a rat, CM. It's fine.
Okay. I've had pet rats. I mean, I've also had pet dogs. You know what? I'm just messed up.
So another thing, Ruth becomes a widow at only 37, which is one of the reasons she pours so much of herself into her community, because she, despite being fertile, both of them, they never had kids. So she kind of treats the town as all of her kids.
Well, in that, there's something else she does because she can't have kids, which is her only flaw. And it is to collect dolls, because dolls are creepy.
Dolls are creepy. But she has her own little schoolhouse with all these dolls that she collects.
Which is much worse.
Yeah.
Which is definitely bad.
And she lets kids play with them.
But I think that's also kind of endearing. Like, she loves them, but is not so obsessed with them. Like, oh, no, you can't touch them. You'll get them dirty or break them. She flat out tells one of the parents, like, your kid is holding a very rare, very expensive doll. But dolls are meant to be played with. Yeah. And they're meant to bring joy. So that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really great. When she becomes constable, she runs out. She runs some people out of town. She runs out an incest ring, hippies, and an abusive stepfather.
Oh, I loved that part, because that also ties in another character that we'll get more of a little later in this chapter, Monster.
Yes.
And I just loved that, the way King describes it, it's just like this perfect little treat that's like really horrible and disgusting. But these kids get a new stepdad, and people in town start noticing that they're showing up with bruises. And it's always, oh, she stepped on a rake. She fell down the stairs. He slipped in the bathtub. And so Ruth goes to have a talk with him, and the guy doesn't want to hear a reason. So she comes back with Monster, who's like 6'8", 300 pounds.
Yeah, he's another statey that worked with her husband, and who has a crush on her. And
they have a talk with the guy, and wouldn't you know it, he stepped on a rake, he fell down the stairs, he slipped in the bathtub. He just had a really unlucky day, and then he decided to leave town. And that's how it's described, and I love it.
That was real amazing. And I think it's because she's so strong that she holds out against, they describe it as Ruth mind and Tommyknocker mind. The people who are kind of keeping their sanity are of Ruth mind, and she starts like running tongue twisters through her head to like block out that noise. And so she's noticing that everybody in town is noticing she's not where they are.
It's really cool. And this whole section, I couldn't help but feel the inspiration King took, because This whole chapter feels very, I'm going to get this story wrong. The Terror at Innsmouth, is that it? It's a Lovecraft story where it's just this town that's wrong because they're all fish worshipping weirdos or whatever. But it feels like that where you get this feeling of her being on the outside and noticing everything. And then the tongue twisters are just Village of the Damned.
Yeah.
It's the brick wall in Village of the Damned, which I thought was really cool.
We also get a glimpse of some overall things that have happened through the town. Now it's not just affecting people who live there. People who are driving through are becoming nauseous the second they get into town. There's a kid who, from the moment they drive in the city limits till the point he drives out, a small child loses 4 teeth. And a woman who we meet briefly earlier on, Mabel, accidentally collapses all her molecules.
That is so cool. Oh, it's also worth mentioning that the only other people who aren't affected, like Ruth, have metal plates in their head.
Yeah.
So she's that strong of a person that she is also unaffected, but does not because she has a metal plate in her head.
Okay. Yes, that is cool. I have to air a grievance right now.
All right.
The metal plates, the ship, what the ship does. Okay, where to start? Okay, Gardner and Ev Hillman, we eventually learn, have metal plates in their head, and that is stopping the influence of the ship on them and stopping them from becoming.
It's like the tin hat theory.
Except that is stupid. Because I forget which character theorizes this. I think it's Gardner in the first book, maybe. Mentions he thinks maybe what if whatever this ship is made of, as we expose it to the surface, what if it's oxidizing?
Yeah.
And there's a cloud that is spreading.
I think I see where you're going with this.
And that's what's changing people. It's a complete guess. It's speculation. It is never, but it's exactly what's happening. Because later in the book, we have a character put on an oxygen mask and it stops the effects of the ship.
Yep.
Those two things aren't connected.
You don't breathe through your head?
A metal plate in your head is not going to stop you from breathing weird alien gas.
I did not even consider that until this exact moment.
The metal plates, they almost make sense.
Yeah.
And would make sense if they went with something I complained about in the first book, the idea of these psychic vibrations, which is nothing. But if that's what it was, it would make sense that the metal plate is blocking that because it's like some kind of weird alien Wi-Fi beaming the Tommyknockers into your head. And they bounce off the metal plate. Sure, I buy that. Nope, it's the air.
See, I think it's both. I think the air is what triggers physical changes, and I think that these psychic vibrations are what triggers mental changes, and the plates are blocking out the mental changes.
Except Gardner is around the ship more than anyone else, and he doesn't even lose his first tooth until almost the last...
like a month in.
Yeah.
But he gets horrific nose and ear bleeds.
But that's from the, whatever the magnetic or whatever the waves, the vibrations.
Because that's like...
Damn it, you guys, I just want this to work. Why are you arguing with me?
I was so with you for just a short while.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, I assume though. No, damn it. I keep trying because they're uncovering more of it. So because more of it was uncovered, like later, for example, when Monster has to use the oxygen mask, I assumed that he was affected so immediately because
so much of it was
exposed. But yeah, Ev doesn't lose his teeth.
Yep.
Wait. Ev has dentures, I bet.
Oh my god.
There we go.
Okay.
Sure.
So next
This is Gardner having The Shining. This is us trying our best. Just trying so hard to make this not
happen.
stupid.
What's not stupid is the scene where Ruth loses 3 hours in her schoolhouse and comes to because her dolls are talking. And the dolls are talking with the voice of the townspeople that are around her. And she has a little chalkboard. And written on the chalkboard, because David has been missing. They've been searching for days. It's been exhausting. Nobody has any trace. But somewhere in her brain, in her Tommyknocker mind, knows that David's gone. So she wakes up, and on the board is written, David Brown is on Altair 4, which is, I don't know if you guys catch the reference to the 1956 film Forbidden Planet.
And it's dumb.
It's in Star Trek. The
it
original
is?
series as well.
Huh.
It is so much less scary when you name stuff.
But I don't think that's like the actual name. I think that it's pulling that collective reference because they keep having dreams that David is lying on a ground that's unfamiliar with a skyline that has no recognizable marks, and he's trying so hard to breathe and he
Which
can't.
reminds you of
the where Mother comes from.
Yeah,
except there's no giant holes in the sky. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, no
But
giant ants.
It's that vision is scary. Being trapped on a weird alien planet, scary. When you give it a dumb pop culture name, not scary. It is the same thing. We are over and over again. He tries to convince us that the name Tommyknockers is scary. It's not. It is a dumb name that he could have called anything else.
If Guard had thought of anything else, that's what everybody in town would call them.
I thought of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Something that could never hurt us. Stay puffed, knocking at the door.
Oh God. So Ruth is now she feels herself becoming more taken over by this influence and gets the feeling that she has to send a signal. And she cuts all of her dolls open, places a gadget she made out of C-cell batteries, wires, calculators, toilet paper tubes, all this stuff, fills her dolls with all of these things, and then drags a giant sack of them to the town hall, where she proceeds to climb into the clock tower and rig it to explode, which is awesome. The thing that I love so much about it is that she sets everything up. She sets up the mechanism so at 3:00 it's gonna explode. People far and wide are gonna see it, and somebody's gonna come to the rescue for this town. She falls asleep, wakes up covered in bats. I've thought of a million ways I don't want to wake up. Covered in bats is up there.
Damn it. I think Ben was right earlier because when
This is stupid.
when she wakes up covered in bats, she freaks out because she's covered in bats.
Sure.
And I just thought, but bats are
Like-
so adorable. Like,
my
wouldn't you be
God.
like, oh, it's like
No.
a adorable living blanket. I wouldn't mind it.
No.
Here's the thing. Every living animal in Haven is dead. This
Yes.
Yeah.
gaseous cloud kills all animals.
And she can hear the thoughts of the bats, and they're insane. And bats are not insane. They're wonderful creatures. So
You can't prove that.
you can't prove I can't prove it.
My point is they should be dead.
Yes.
Like, why are there bats?
They're protected in the clock tower. Time.
They all
protects
have
them.
metal plates in their head.
Yes. But in a panic, she wakes up and like rips some of them in half, which is great. Falls down the ladder and breaks all of her ribs. And she prays for death. And at 3:05, that prayer is answered because all of her dolls explode, firing the top of Town Hall into the sky like a blazing green rocket.
We should also mention that before she does this drastic thing, she does try to leave town. She tries to escape.
Yes.
And while other people like Ev and Hilly were able to escape because he took his grandson to the hospital, she can't. It's like there's an invisible force, which made me think of Under the Dome, of course.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same like spongy force field that Gardner felt around the mini sun in God, we haven't talked about her in so long. What's the main
Bobby.
character of this book named?
Bobby.
Bobby in her basement. But yeah, I love that she has this plan to send a signal to blow up the town hall, and it's pointless because everyone in town, as much as she is trying to block them out, they know they're all connected. They're a hive mind because all of them at the exact moment that this is going to explode, every person in town goes inside, goes into their basements. Like, they all know that this is coming. They knew. Why didn't they just stop her?
I think it was their way of getting rid of her without actually having to kill her because they love her. So they didn't want to kill her.
But immediately afterward, they're like, oh no! We wish that wouldn't have happened.
Oh, we fucked up. Oh, we really fucked up this one, guys.
Yeah. It's that thing of like, there's no consistency on when they can read minds, when they are Tommyknockers, and when they're just the townsfolk.
Yeah, because they could have stopped her at any time.
Yes. There's no delineation. It's just, oh, we're the Tommyknockers. We're going to go hide from the explosion. But we didn't.
But we could have stopped it.
But we could have just stopped it.
And next, we meet two characters who really wish they would have stopped that explosion. Beach Jernigan and Dick Allison. Ben, will you tell us about Beach and Dick?
They are indistinguishable from one another.
Pretty much. Beach is a little more classic King, overly aggressive villain, I think.
Yeah, they when they introduce Beach, they say something along the lines of like, even before all the Tommyknockers stuff happened, he would have been glad to do some violence on people.
Yeah.
And why? It's never explained. It's like, it's almost hinted at that he's like this weird militant guy, but it's never, why?
I think
Against
it's
who?
used. I think it's used to explain why he is so eager to make his flaming green railgun that he makes, and why he's the first to volunteer. Like, yeah, I'll go kill those cops.
They are just two of the kind of higher ups. We find out later that Bobby has been slowly bringing a select few townspeople to, in big quotes, the shed, to, in big quotes, become a thing that I swear if they had said it one more fucking time, it's another thing that's like, that's legitimately ominous. The becoming is way more ominous than Tommyknockers, but he says it's one of those phrases that King just gets hooked in his mind and can't stop using. What was I saying? Anyway, they're just two guys and they blow up some cops.
Yeah, the tower, the clock tower exploding did bring in some cops from Derry, Bent, and Jingles, and they realize the cover story of, a furnace exploded and obliterated the whole top of the building and only killed one person and blew up all these dolls. It's fine. What I do think is cool is like the inventive way they used the telepathy. So they're blocking the signal for the cops. They're scrambling it. So as the cops are trying to call back to headquarters, they have someone else focused on reading their minds, because they make the point of, if you ask somebody a question, in your head, you've already formulated the answer you think you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And so they have somebody reading those cops' mind, and then they just say exactly what they think they're going to hear. So the cops are like, this is weird, but it checks out, whatever. And they get rid of them by Beach blocking the road down as they head back to Derry and just vaporizing them and framing this very elaborate crime scene, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, vaporizing them to the point where afterwards he goes into the middle of the road and picks up a shoe with a foot still in it.
You know, he just copied that one lady who was like vacuuming and vaporized herself.
Yeah.
Hers seemed less violent.
Very peaceful, just collapsing onto your molecules. Yeah. Jacklighting is a crime in Maine.
Yeah.
Which is where you shine a bright light in a deer's face to stun them and then shoot them.
How would someone know you did that?
It must just be, I took it as just that's a thing that happens in Maine.
Yeah.
And they found a dead deer, and they're like, oh, someone must have been doing that. It's not deer season. And they killed these cops to get away with it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just mean, like, it's weird to make something like that illegal because the deer's never going to be like, yeah, he shined this bright light in my eyes and it stunned me, so that's how he got me.
Well,
How would you know if someone was deer hunting that way?
Sure. I think it's also more important that it's not deer season, so hunting deer is technically illegal at this point.
It's a stupid plan.
Sure.
But here's the thing. All of the Tommyknockers plans are dumb. And that's a positive in this book, I think.
Question.
Yes.
Is it because they're aliens?
Yes.
And the town's dumb?
No, I see. That's what I think it is they're so focused on becoming and digging up the ship that when something comes up, like, oh, fuck, our clock tower is gone. We have to, just put a big projection up there.
Build a 3D projector.
Build a 3D projector that only shows one time and looks kind of bad. And then no one will believe it. And, like, obviously that's not going to work and doesn't. But I think that's kind of a cool way of showing that they're half alien now. Yeah. They don't know.
It feels like, they're so focused on the excavation, they're just like, put a Band-Aid on that. Once we've all become, we'll figure it out. For now, just do this.
Yeah, I actually, it's one point where everyone does stuff for dumb reasons actually works for the book's favor.
Yeah. Then we go to our next chapter about Ev Hillman, who is Hilly and David's grandpa. The only thing, before we get into the main thing that happens with him, I just thought it was cool that they dropped a Dead Zone reference in there.
This book is chock-a-block.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we've met Jack from Talisman. Mm-hmm. There are multiple Pennywise sightings.
Yep.
Yeah, they mentioned Jack Smith from the Dead Zone, and I swear there was another one, wasn't there? We get to it, the woods.
Oh, yes!
Yes!
So Ev is doing this research, and just like Bobby, arbitrarily puts a compass down and just starts drawing circles. And we find out that the center focus, where the true center of Haven is Big Engine Woods, a.k.a. the Burning Woods, which I would like to just refer to it as the Burning Woods from now
absolutely. On. Yeah, he even, mentions, he's like, people probably don't want to call it that because it's not cool. But then he continues to call it that.
Yeah.
So,
But the point is that the Burning Woods belonged to the Micmac Indians.
Ludlow is mentioned in name. They say it in Ludlow, where the Micmac chief was buried, and people don't know where that is anymore.
I love that on his deathbed, they weren't sure if he was just expressing that the land was cursed or if he was cursing the land.
Yeah. Ev has been following all of this and knows he has to get back to town because he needs to get to the bottom of this, basically. And he goes to see Butch Monster Dugan, who is, as we mentioned, a friend of Ruth's and a longtime crush on Ruth. He goes to him and he basically says, I can prove something is happening here, but if I go back to that town, they're not going to let me leave a second time. There's no way. So while you're all at the funeral tomorrow, I'm going to take a flare gun, fire it up. You see a flare, just know that I'm in trouble. That's the plan. And Monster is like trying not to believe him, but at the same time, all of it just feels like it makes sense. To the point where after Ev leaves, Monster runs out and is like, no, I'm coming with you. And then what I thought was fantastic of Ev to suggest, tell all of your officers, don't tell a single person what you're doing. Tell them all you have the flu, and that's why you can't go. Knowing that everybody in town will read everybody's mind, so they'll instantly believe, oh, that's why he's not here. He has the flu.
I thought it was cool. Part of the way that he was able to buy into what Ev was saying, despite how crazy it sounded, was because of his relationship with Ruth, being in love with her, and he was close enough to her that he could tell something was wrong the last few times they talked. And then the way she handled David's missing persons case wasn't at all like her. So I feel like that was kind of how Ev got in with him a little bit, because he referenced her death as not an accident.
Yeah. It was definitely his like close connection to Ruth that made him care. And not the fact that after not believing Ev for a real long time, he suddenly remembers, wait a second, the last time I talked to Ruth before her death, she kept saying, stay away from Haven. That's weird.
That's also like the way this book starts out, because it feels like it's shoehorned in, but it's being written. So you can put it wherever you want. You can write things around it to support it.
That is the craziest piece of book criticism I've ever heard. Yes, it doesn't make sense, but it's a book. So you can say whatever you want.
No.
It's the classic book argument.
You guys completely took that not the way I said it.
I'm sorry. No, I understand.
My point is, he could have written that in a way that made sense, because he can put that tidbit of information anywhere in the book that won't make it feel tacked on.
Yeah, he could have made it not feel so sudden of like, oh yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is the valuable point of including, we kind of glossed over it, of the amount of times that Ruth reaches out to him during all of this, and his reaction to finding out the only one person who died, and it's Ruth. And that just, all of that adds up to all of this shadiness. And Ev, thinking ahead, goes to a medical supply store and buys an oxygen tank.
Why?
No, not why did he buy it? Why didn't he buy a bunch of refills?
That too.
Yeah, that too.
But he only bought 25
just a full hazmat
suit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, why? Why does he know, it's probably the air? Why?
See, what?
How would he know that?
Because the day that it was before Ruth died, they had a nice day that was very breezy. Like the weather had been very like stagnant. They didn't have a lot of heavy wind.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it kind of blew that and dissipated it.
And everybody woke up feeling like they had a massive hangover that
People
day.
were a little more normal that day. They couldn't quite understand their previous behavior.
Yeah.
I did not catch that.
I as soon as I saw Sam's face, I was like, ooh, I remember that now.
Fuck. Okay. 1 point for Tommyknockers. Good job.
1 point for Sia.
Yeah. Sam, you get all the points. It's cool.
Let's talk about the funeral. So the day of the funeral, Haven has all of these people, this influx of people, because she touched so many lives and did so many things. Everybody is gathering to pay their respects. And everybody we touch base with is at a different level of feeling sick as hell, which is great. The great story about this is Ev and Monster driving all the way around the perimeter of Haven so as not to get in the city limits until they hear the church bells ring.
But then, so they go through all this trouble to drive around.
Yes, they do.
And then Ev decides, I'm going to use telepathy.
Yeah.
To, alert every townsperson exactly. He could have just driven straight past the funeral.
Yes.
Well, he also, he gets there and he's like, how do I prove what's going on to Monster? I'm going to think as loud as I can. And then Monster's like, what? And then he's like, yeah, you think that's crazy. Check this out. And he turns on the radio and gets a really far away radio station. Do that first.
Yeah. If you really backwards scaling. It's just like that one lady reading the townspeople's minds. Getting reverse order news. So Bobby and the other townspeople that are in this inner circle obviously hear the screaming in their head from a stranger. And they leave the funeral to apprehend these intruders. We finally check back in with Guard, who has been just tying one on every single day since we last saw him, to the point where he is now puking up blood almost daily.
And making revelations that were obvious since the first time he saw the ship.
He becomes...
Wait, are these guys going to use this for weapons? Fuck you, Gardner.
That was his idea too.
Yeah.
He does become insufferable. in this part.
Become. Yes.
He's becoming insufferable. I actually
get
really
that.
like the becoming thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is cool and weird and ominous.
Yeah, I'm probably going to use it.
The thing that I like about it is to me, it expresses the aliens, like the limited way of explaining how this alien species would describe what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's the closest they can get.
So are the Tommyknockers terraforming Earth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're at least terraforming what they can now. I don't know.
Are they?
Well, they're changing people.
Are they becoming what the aliens were in the ship in the first place?
That's what I
Are
assume.
they something new? Okay, here's the thing. Let's stop for a second to talk about how shitty are these aliens? Okay, how did this society of aliens that we are being represented get far enough to become space travelers? Because they're assholes. They are violent and irrational. Well, okay, maybe not irrational. They're violent. They just don't seem like a society that works.
But what if none of that is true? What if they are a society that works? What if they are more even keeled? But the human element is what corrupts them.
Yeah, I did think of that because I was like, they're just like, they fight in the streets and this guy makes another guy disappear into space and like,
into the Phantom Zone, dude.
Yeah, what a stupid society. Humans do all that stuff. Never mind.
Yeah. Well, back to our intruders. Ev and Dugan finally pull up to the ship, and there is over 100 feet of the ship is now exposed. It feels like they're halfway, is essentially the vibe they get when Bobby and her armed forces show up.
Because again, Ev alerted them
Screamed
to their presence.
And to be fair, Ev does his best by shooting Beach with a flare gun.
Yeah.
This is one of the other few things I remember from reading this the first time. For some reason, the idea of a guy exploding when getting shot with a flare gun really stuck in my mind.
It's a brutal death. Well, it talks about how his eyes like melt.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's so cool. They try to make their getaway, but Bobby takes Ev out with a shotgun stock to the back of the head. Then Dugan fires through the Jeep's windows into Bobby's torso, tearing her lung open.
Whew.
And I was at first like, oh shit, they're gonna kill Bobby in the second part of this book? That would be insane.
Yeah.
And it is, which is why they don't do it. Instead, they capture them, take them all back, and one by one bring Ev and Dugan into the shed to make them become.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Are there Tommyknockers in the shed? Or is it something that Bobby built?
I think we're going to find out at the very beginning of book 3.
I'm
because
sure
we
we're
have
gonna
kind of an
find out,
idea. We have an
but-
idea at the end of this chapter what
I
is in
know
there.
it's something like organic, but because previously she had said that
Maybe 4-legged?
the Tommyknockers were dead.
Yes.
But it didn't seem like she was lying
Yes.
when she said that.
Right.
No, I think the Tommyknockers are dead in the ship, but it's broadcasting this information into their heads, and she has built something in the shed to make the becoming happen.
So it's not the Tommyknockers in the shed.
No, I think
Correct.
Josh is
Okay.
hinting pretty strong at what's in the shed.
Yes.
I missed it. I don't know. No
it's
idea.
at
what's-
the very
well,
end.
Your brain's about to get...
no!
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
And what's even more upsetting is before we find out that, because Gardner puts 2 and 2 together, something that I knew from the first book, like it was pretty obvious.
Now that I read it, I was like, fuck, how did I miss that?
My brain
what's
doesn't want to accept this.
really upsetting is they do that thing where King will be writing what people are saying and then what they're thinking in parentheses.
That interrupts what they're saying.
And at some point, someone is thinking about going into the shed, the becoming, and in the like parenthetical thought bubbles, they say, went into the shed, ate to become, and it was like this weird reference to like the
like
the
devouring.
Eucharist.
Yeah.
Like take this of my body and eat to become.
Mm-hmm.
What are they eating?
Well, for people who haven't read along, if you didn't pick up on my comments earlier.
I can't finish book 3.
So, for our final chapter, The Town Concluded, we get to spend time with Guard.
For a really long time.
For a real long time. So, we find out that Guard has been, since Bobby's disappearance, where they said that she was exhausted and they took her to the hospital. He's had a rotating crew of partners. One of which almost blows him up because they're not listening to him because he can't speak psychically. So he gets really pissed off. And what I thought was really funny is he yells at the guy, but yells to everybody in town, specifically just at that guy.
Mm-hmm. That was cool.
Yeah, like he gets it. That we touch base a little bit on, it's referred to as the last act of aggression in town, where a guy makes a device that opens up a portal and sucks a dude in. But once that dude vanishes through, they hear the voice of a small child calling out for help. So,
it's so sad.
and then they hear him like asking for help, and then the dude just shuts the portal off.
Okay, so before, this is such a small part, and by small, I mean it goes on for 15 minutes. This part, this part opens with, the last act of true irrationality in Haven happened on this day. And it's just this story about these two old guys who had beef before the becoming and the revenge. But King at the beginning of the story says, it's just a little thing. It wasn't really important. But since it was the last one, it merits a small, brief mention. And then he goes on forever about it. And also, that's this entire second book. It's like, none of this really affects the main story, which is digging up the machine and what's happening to Bobby and Gardner.
But this made me happy to know that David's still technically alive, because time works different where he is. And I love that everybody talks about it and they're like, he's still alive. We'll just keep him there in case we need him. Yeah. They'll just move on, leave him there.
Yeah, they say Altair 4 time works different, and that on that planet, it's only been 1 year since the Earth was spit out of the sun.
Yeah.
So he's not only on a different planet, he's millions of years in the past.
Yeah.
Hold on. But if he was yelling, "Help me, please," would they even hear that whole sentence?
Yeah, that's... Well, time was linked together for a second.
Okay, so it sped up as it reached the portal?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, that makes as much sense as anything.
We get the return of Freeman Moss, who we mentioned last episode, who gave Guard a ride, who actually hangs out for a decent amount of time, and him and Guard actually kind of become pals.
This is my pitch I mentioned earlier, and how this second book, as much as I enjoy it for how crazy it is, how it could have made this into a book that makes sense. Gardner has this rotation of guards, and the first two he hates, and they hate him. And then Freeman Moss comes, and they actually get along, and they start to bond. That's interesting. This second book should have followed Gardner as he deals with the changing of the town around him and how his relationship with all of these characters, because there's so many characters that aren't characters. They're just like, I can't tell you the difference between
Dick Ellison and
Jernigan. Butch Cassidy. Like they're just interchangeable people that are turning into aliens. Like if we would have had Gardner, like knowing them as people and then seeing their changes and then maybe even being friends with them.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
This part makes me think, are the Tommyknockers bad guys?
I think the Tommyknockers are just trying to survive.
Exactly.
I think that's it.
All that we know up to this point, the Tommyknockers' entire motivation is digging up their ship. That's all we know.
Yeah.
Are they bad guys? Who fucking knows?
Well, they do some kind of fucked up stuff, so maybe.
I guess.
Again, is that the nature of the humans making the decisions violent? So there's a lot of questionable area there.
Also, yeah, the morality of these are an extinct race of aliens trying to come back, of course they're going to fight to
Survive.
exist and survive.
I have a problem.
Yeah.
Book 3 is not where the town concluded begins.
The town concluded is where book 2 ends. Book 3 is titled The Tommyknockers.
Oh.
Did you not finish the reading?
No, I'm sorry. I thought that... Because
That's why you're so confused about this.
3, the town concluded, and so I thought it was book 3. And I read ahead. I only knew a little bit about what we just talked about. Because it's like, I'll just read ahead a little bit. I am so sorry. I didn't know.
No worries.
I didn't know I didn't finish book 2. Don't title something 3 and then have book 3.
Oh God! All right, there's not much left. So I'm gonna, because of where we're at on
all of
time.
this is not meaning anything.
I was like, Freeman, wait, what are you guys talking about?
Oh my God!
Leave this in. That's weird.
I'm gonna have to because I sound like a moron earlier.
This is one of those things I'm telling you need to cut and set aside for when we release a bloopers episode of all the shit you usually edit out.
Just me being dumb.
Keep this whole section. You don't have the market on being dumb at this table. So we get a few last glimpses of the world outside the dig site. A neurosurgeon flies over the ship, discovers time travel, and dies, which is great.
His brain explodes, and we talk about flight insurance a lot.
I thought that was really cool.
Good bluff, CM.
They mention that they have to send the youngest people in town out because anybody who's older can't leave city limits without dying. And if people leave, they deteriorate in health so fast. 2 of their youngest people leave town and within hours have to return with supplies because they're getting sick and they're throwing up blood.
Which really does support CM's theory that they're terraforming. Because the atmosphere is completely different.
The people who have been becoming are starting to appear translucent. The line I pulled out was that one of the guys, when he realizes he's translucent, looks down and sees a tentacle, white at its tip, then shading to rose, and finally to a dark blood red as it thickened towards its unseen base, fell out through the fly of his pajama bottoms.
So he's just looking at his dick.
Yeah, but it's like a translucent dick.
Is that like every man's nightmare?
The becoming gives you dick tentacles.
Yes.
And
dick tentacles.
Bobby mentions that soon in Haven there will be no gender.
There will be no genitals.
There will be no genitals.
No, there will be. They're just tentacles.
They're just tentacles.
Genticles.
Damn it.
I think that's from Futurama or something.
Okay. So Guard is alone at the end of this, and lo and behold, Bobby shows up. And they bang, of course. And
it's so unpleasant.
It's a really unpleasant sex
Does
scene.
it even really happen?
Yeah,
it has that feeling of it's her, like a telepathic thing.
Oh,
because
no. I don't think so.
No,
I think the sex was like sex with a blow-up doll,
like Demolition Man.
Yeah, wait.
Where they put on the helmets?
Yeah. like my X-Men fan fiction between Rogue and Jean Grey.
Yeah.
That I read is listeners very real.
Oh, it's so good. We need to release that on Patreon.
It's on YouTube somewhere. I've searched for it and can't find it. So good luck with that, constant readers.
The point here is that Bobby has decided they only have about a mile to go till the hatch, and Bobby and Guard are going to finish together because they started together. But something weird is...
They just said...
Nice.
Yeah, okay.
Something weird has been happening. Bobby's been sneezing a lot, which is very strange. Guard finally puts it together that with whatever she's been going through, she's needed a lot of comfort, and her lovely little dog, Peter, had always given her that comfort when she was really low. And it's weird. Being around Peter also made her allergies flare up really bad.
Something that has never been mentioned before in the book so far.
Not at all.
But again, it's a book. You can put it wherever you want.
Classic book argument.
Could have put it in there earlier.
Yeah. And Guard puts these pieces together and decides he's going to drink as hard and as fast as he can to forget what he just pieced together.
You know...
That would explain why you didn't catch that.
Yeah, you guys, I feel the way some of our listeners, because I know a few of them don't read along with us. They just listen and they might not have ever read the book.
Right.
Now I get it. I know how they feel. And that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us next time where we cover Book 3, The Tommyknockers. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham, I'm CM Alexander reminding you, a person ought to pay the freight on his own obsession. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to The Tommyknockers Part 2. We hope you enjoyed it. Last episode, we talked about the inspiration behind this story, and apparently, it also resembles a late 50s British sci-fi series, Quartermass in the Pit, which sounds like a pretty cool show and was well received by viewers and critics. Something worth checking out for sure. And check us out on our social media at Derry Public Radio, or send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Visit our website, constantreaders.org, for everything Stephen King and Stephen King adjacent. And if you want to show your support, give us some love, please check out our Patreon page. Members at the $5 and up tier get access to our bonus podcast, The Club. And speaking of our Patreon, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge the most beautiful, amazing, supportive people in the world. Kaya Benedict, Dee Dee Sharonford, Dawn Burr, Bryant Burnett, Brad Hahn, Stephanie Pollard, Carlotta Luna, Joel Jones, Jeremy Marr, Amy Lawless, Lyndon Gordon, Lisa Kahn, Tori Lynn McCamey, Casey Bauer, Matt Kendall, Spanky, Reed Flynn, Phil Thiessen, and Alicia Lillian. Thank you so much for your continued support. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.